My name is Mia Snyder, and I'm 25 years old. I live with my dad and my mom, and we've always been a family of three. Ever since I was little, I've admired my dad a lot. He runs his own business and is always very busy, so he's not home often. But whenever he has some free time, he makes sure to spend it with me. On his days off, he dedicates most of his time to being with me. He's a wonderful dad. My mom is quite different from my dad. As far as I can remember, I've never seen her work a job outside our home. She takes care of the house and keeps things in order, but she doesn't help with my dad's business or work elsewhere. We are financially comfortable, which is why my mom often spends her time dressed up and going out. However, seeing her lifestyle, I realized early on that I didn't want to be like her. She doesn't really like kids, and she didn't pay much attention to me. Sometimes, I felt very lonely because of this, but my dad always made an effort to make me feel loved and included. I think he understood how my mom felt about me, so he tried to make sure I never felt left out or alone. One memory that stands out is when I would come home and find my mom getting ready to go out. I remember one day saying, "I'm home, Mom," and she'd respond, "Oh, is it that late already? I'm going out, so eat some snacks and take care of the house, okay?" There were times we planned to do things together, like go shopping and cook curry, but she often canceled at the last minute, saying something came up. As a child, this would make me cry, but over time, I learned not to take her promises seriously. My dad was different. He never made vague promises. If he said we'd do something, we did it. Over the years, I grew to see him as a reliable and trustworthy person. I admired him so much that after graduating from university, I begged him to let me work at his company. Being an only child, I started thinking about taking over the business one day and continuing my dad's legacy. When I turned 19, my dad began taking me out for drinks, and we had many conversations where I learned a lot from him. My mom's involvement in raising me was minimal. The only time she really tried to intervene in my life was during my sophomore year of college. Despite her limited involvement, my bond with my dad grew stronger, and my desire to work at his company solidified. One day, I told my dad, "Dad, I want to work at your company," marking the beginning of my journey to follow in his footsteps. After I graduated from school, I started preparing to work at my dad's company. I even dreamed of succeeding him one day. When I told my parents, my dad seemed supportive but surprised. However, my mom had a different reaction. "Mia, are you sure?" she asked. "Wait a minute, a girl doesn't need to do that." "Why not?" I responded, determined. "I want to work hard like Dad." She sighed and said, "A woman should find a good man and let her husband earn a living." That was such a typical thing for my mom to say. At that moment, I realized she didn't understand my aspirations, so I ended the conversation. I didn't want to live a life dependent on someone else like my mom. Instead, I aimed to be a strong, independent woman. For the rest of my college days, I focused on studying hard. As soon as I graduated, I joined my father's company. Although I couldn't persuade my mom to support my decision, she eventually seemed to accept it, saying, "If you want to live your life this way, that's fine with me. But you'll be the one who has to deal with the consequences of not listening to your mother." I chose to follow my own path and join the company. As I spent more time working with my dad, our bond grew stronger, but the distance between my mom and me widened. I don't think she was happy with the situation. At work, my dad dedicated a lot of time and effort to training me, and I appreciated his guidance. However, there was a serious reason behind his dedication. My dad was sick. He took about 6 months to introduce me to various people and teach me the ins and outs of the business. Then, one day, he collapsed at the workplace. He was rushed to the hospital, and for the next 5 years, he battled his illness. During that time, I stepped up to help run the company. People often ask me how things were going, including my mom, who once questioned, "Mia, how's the company doing? Is it running smoothly without your dad?" "It's really hard right now," I admitted, "but everyone is supporting me. I'm sure it will be fine because Dad trusted me with everything I need to know." My mom's response was blunt and unsupportive. "Well, as long as that's the case. If you, a woman, take over as the second generation and the company fails, it would be a real shame. So be prepared for that." It saddened me to hear her say that, especially since it showed she cared more about how others perceived us than about the well-being of the company or me. I often found myself arguing with my mom about these things. My dad, despite his illness, would come to the company on his better days, but his health gradually declined over 5 years. In the last year of his life, he was almost bedridden. During one of his final visits to the company, he told me something I'll never forget. "This company and its employees are precious treasures to me, but I have to let go of my treasure now. Mia, over the past few years, I've watched you work, and I believe I can trust you with it. Please, protect this place and everyone here for me." His words filled me with a sense of responsibility and honor. I responded, "Dad, I don't know if I can be exactly like you, but I'll keep trying to get closer to the person I've always admired. You can rest easy." From that day, the title of representative was passed on to me. I became incredibly busy, often unable to go home, as my father remained in the hospital. I made time to visit him as much as possible, though. My mom, however, only did the bare minimum, like bringing him changes of clothes, and even that seemed to be a chore for her. I wondered what she truly felt for my father. Did she have any love or gratitude for him, or any pity for his condition? It made me sad to think that she might not. I recalled how hard my dad had worked for our family, especially for me when I was young and unable to feel my mother's love. No matter how tired I was, I made a point to visit him as often as possible. This routine continued for about a year until my father passed away peacefully in his sleep. The loss hit me hard, but I was so overwhelmed with responsibilities that I barely had time to grieve. My mom, who had never been involved in such matters, insisted that I handle everything from funeral arrangements to hospital paperwork. Realistically, I hadn't expected her to take on these tasks, as she had always lived a life of leisure. So, I silently took care of everything. The day after the funeral, my mother approached me and said, "Mia, the funeral is over and you've settled down now, haven't you? Please leave this house. I've just inherited 350 million yen, so I have no use for you anymore." Her words were shocking, yet somehow expected. I had already concluded that any further discussion with her would be pointless. It seemed that, for her, having money was enough to live a comfortable life, without regard for the emotional or relational aspects. It was a stark contrast to the values my dad had instilled in me. I had so many questions, but I decided it was best to leave. The next day, I called a service to sell all my belongings. My mother was utterly surprised at how quickly I had organized my departure. However, there was something she didn't know. Despite her claim of inheriting 350 million yen, my father had entrusted me with all financial matters. I was the rightful inheritor, and there wasn't a single penny left for her. My father had insisted on this arrangement while he was still healthy. He had said, "Your mother doesn't understand anything about money management or spending. I want you to give her household expenses on a monthly basis. If she gets a large sum, she'll likely go bankrupt immediately. If she complains, tell her you won't give her a single penny." "No, just kidding. But if you have trouble dealing with her, give her this." He handed me an SD card, explaining that it contained a video letter for her. I never imagined I would need to use it, but given her recent behavior, I thought the day would come soon. Sure enough, Shortly after I left, my mother contacted me. She was alone in our spacious house and seemed desperate. "Come home immediately," she demanded. "What are you talking about?" "I'm working," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "I just need to talk to you." "Please come quickly," she insisted. Annoyed by her self-centered attitude, I decided to visit her with the SD card in hand. As soon as I arrived, she accused me of running off with all of my father's inheritance. "You ran off with everything, didn't you? I knew something was off since you left right away. Hand over your father's inheritance to me now." I was shocked by her greed and lack of maternal concern. "How greedy can you be? You can't even act right as a mother. Who do you think you're talking to?" I replied, trying to stay calm. I then quietly handed her the SD card. "What's this?" she asked, looking confused. "Oh, I guess you don't even know how to watch this," I said, somewhat mocking her ignorance. I took out my laptop, inserted the SD card, and played the video. On the screen appeared my father, as healthy as he once was, ready to deliver his final message to her. I wondered how my mother would react to the video letter. After setting up the video for her, I left the room in silence, unsure of how she would respond. I had never seen my mother defy my father while he was alive, but now that he was gone, would his words still have an impact on her? When I returned, I found my mother in tears. I couldn't believe it. She was crying after watching the video of my late father. Curious but respectful, I had never watched the video myself, so I didn't know what had moved her so deeply. "Mom, are you okay?" I asked gently. She composed herself and replied, "Yes, I'm okay for now. I understand. I'll follow your father's instructions and leave everything to you from now on. Please go home for today." I could tell she didn't want me to see her vulnerable, so I left quietly. As I walked away, I was filled with questions. What had my father said to her? How had he managed to calm her down? Nearly a month passed without any contact from my mother, and I began to worry. During a lunch break, I decided to visit her, but she wasn't home. That evening, I went back and saw the lights on in the house, which was a relief. "I'm sorry for dropping in suddenly," I said as she opened the door. "I came by earlier, but you weren't home, and I got worried." "I'm sorry," she replied. "I was out for my part-time job during the day." Part-time job. I was stunned. My mother, who had never worked, was now employed? What had happened? "Didn't you watch that video?" she asked. "It was a letter from your father to me, so I didn't watch it. You can take it home and watch it too, Mia." With some hesitation, I took the SD card from her. My mother's unexpected demeanor and the content of the video made me nervous, but I felt compelled to understand what my father had communicated. I returned to the office, sat at my father's desk, and played the video. The video started with my father speaking to my mother. "Honey, if you're watching this, it means you haven't been able to communicate with Mia. First of all, thank you so much for helping me raise Mia. Without you, I don't think I could have managed the company while bringing her up." There was a strange tone in his voice that I couldn't place. Then, he said something shocking. "You've taken care of Mia, even though she is not your child, and I have nothing but gratitude for you standing by my side all these years. But as a result, you've given up on your dreams and reached this age without earning your own living, for which I take responsibility." The revelation hit me like a tidal wave. I wasn't my mother's biological child, and my father's acknowledgement of her sacrifices and regrets added a layer of complexity to their relationship that I had never understood. "Because I allowed you to live a life of luxury, I'm sure you'll be in trouble when I'm gone." The realization that I wasn't my mother's biological child shocked me. It suddenly made sense, why she seemed distant, yet still took care of me. She had been doing the bare minimum for a child who wasn't hers. My father continued, explaining how he hadn't registered their marriage because my mother felt bad for her sister. This led to him supporting her without any formal ties. He expressed his concerns about her future, acknowledging that he had taken away her chance to build a life for herself. I spent the entire night processing these revelations. The next day, I confronted my mother. "Mom, I watched the video from Dad yesterday." "You know it all now," she replied. "I raised you because I was asked to, that's all." "What happened to my biological mother?" I asked, seeking clarity. "You are the child of my sister and your father," she explained. "My sister died right after giving birth to you, and I promised your distressed father that I would help raise you. I became your mother." Hearing this filled in so many gaps. My mother had once worked in a diner, where she met my father. She had been lively and hardworking, with a dream of owning her own diner. But when she decided to take me in, she gave up on that dream. My father had reminded her of this dream in his video, which prompted her to start working again. She was now training as a part-timer to eventually open her own diner. "I should have done this earlier," she admitted. "Working is fun and suits me." "I'm so sorry," I said, feeling guilty. "I had no idea it was my fault you didn't work." "It's not your fault, Mia," she reassured me. "I made the decision myself. But I'm not good with children, so I couldn't handle you well. I'm the one who caused you trouble." This was a turning point in our relationship. For the first time, we had a heartfelt conversation. I began to understand my mother more, realizing the sacrifices she had made and the life she had lost. Since then, we've talked more openly, and we decided to use the money my father left to fund the opening of her diner. My mother, once proud and distant, became more humble and even hesitant about accepting the funds, which was unimaginable before. I continued my regular job but also helped her with the diner, leading to us spending more time together. This experience has brought us closer, allowing me to see a different side of my mother and understand her struggles and aspirations. I attribute this newfound relationship with my mother to my father. She insisted on managing her living expenses with her own income, not wanting to rely on the inheritance my father left. I told her, "Promise me you'll let me know if you're struggling. After all, Dad trusted me to take care of you." "I'll be fine," she said confidently. "Living on my own doesn't cost much. But for the diner's expenses, I'll need your support." "Of course," I assured her. "I'm looking forward to it too. So do your best." After years of distance, we finally felt like a real family. The truth about my parentage and the timing of these revelations seemed to have come at the right moment for both of us. The night before the diner opened, I couldn't help but feel proud of my mother. "Your diner is finally opening tomorrow. Your dream is coming true," I said to her. She smiled, a mix of excitement and nostalgia in her eyes. "Seeing you work so hard at the company reminded me of my own dreams when I was younger. I believe that's why I've made it this far. It's all thanks to you and your father. Thank you so much." "Mom, promise me you'll always be my mom," I said, feeling a deep bond forming between us. "Mia," she responded warmly, "let's get along even better from now on. After all, we only have each other." "That's true," I agreed. With my father's death, many truths came to light. I accepted the reality and decided to live on with my mother, cherishing the bond we were building. Observing her lifestyle, I considered moving back to my hometown to live with her. She was concerned about my poor diet, as I didn't cook much, and was supportive of the idea. I thought about how surprised my father would be to see us getting along so well. I felt a strong responsibility to protect his legacy, including the house, company, and inheritance he left behind. To become a true family, my mother and I visited the graves of my father and my biological mother, her older sister, to share updates about our lives. After going through the adoption process, I was officially registered as my mother's daughter. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in our lives, one where we were not just tied by obligation but by a genuine, heartfelt connection.